My dear students and learners, in this lecture, I am going to discuss the process of business research. Students, you know that a process is to be followed to conduct a business research. And you also know that business research is a research that is conducted on the business problem to make the decision by the business managers. So, in business research process, there are 7 steps involved, such as first step is the definition of the research problem. Second, literature review. Third, hypothesis development. Fourth is the research design. Fifth, data collection. Sixth, data analysis. And the 7th step is the analyzing, interpreting and report writing. Now, I am going to discuss in detail of these 7 steps of business research process. The first step of business research process is definition of the research problem. Now, the researcher has to define the research problem. That means each and every researcher has a kind of research question. What researcher wants to do? What researcher wants to uncover from the research? So that is called research question, and that is research problem, and this problem is to be defined. For example, if the researcher is interested to conduct research on the job satisfaction of garment workers in Bangladesh, in that case, researcher will have to explain the nature of job satisfaction of garment workers. That means the job satisfaction of garment workers may depend on the workload, then supervisor's behavior, then working time and working condition, and so on. At the same time, researcher has to define who will be his or her respondents, whether female workers or male workers or both. That means when these all are relevant aspects explained and determined in advance, then it is called the definition of research problem. The second step of business research problem is review of literature. Now you may have a question, why a researcher has to review the literature? The reason is very simple, that there are studies, of course, there were studies in past. So if the researcher can go through those studies, the researcher can identify a kind of variables, relevant variables, and also have an idea or understanding regarding the problem on who is he or she is going to conduct research. So review of literature means the studied or the studies which are conducted in past, and what were their problems, how about their findings. These are identified through literature review, and based on it, researcher develops a kind of conceptual framework, and this conceptual framework or research framework is tested later on. The third step of this business research process is development of hypothesis. Now we need to know what is hypothesis. Hypothesis means it is an assumption which is assumed in advance before conducting research. Then it is called hypothesis. For example, researcher may assume that the satisfaction of the garment workers in Bangladesh is not, satisfaction level is not very high. So if it is assumed, then it is called hypothesis. But remember that the assumption or the hypothesis must be testable, empirically testable. If the hypothesis or the assumption is not empirically testable, then it is not called hypothesis, it is called proposition. Now the next step of business research process is the designing the research method. That means designing the research. Under this section, researcher has to identify what type of research he or she is going to conduct, whether it will be an exploratory research or descriptive research or causal research. Researcher also has to identify or describe the respondents. Who will be the respondents? How many people will be the respondents who are in the population? These all are the issues should be settled down before starting research, and this part of this research process is called research design. The next part of this business research process is collection of data. Now, when researcher has got knows the number of respondents to be interviewed, researcher knows who are the population, researcher knows what about the questionnaire or the checklist, then only researcher can go for collecting information. Now, in collecting information, researcher can go for directly to the for collecting data from the respondents through questionnaire. Now, in questionnaire, there are two types of questionnaires: a structured questionnaire and unstructured questionnaire. Researcher can follow any one of these two types of questionnaires. Again, in questions, there are two types of questions: open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Depending on the analysis, researcher has to design and develop this questionnaire. So, researcher may himself go to the respondent and collect information, or researcher can take help of others to collect the information, or researcher can send this through email or through Google or internet. Researcher can also by using information and communication technology, researcher also can collect information. Now, after collecting information, researcher has to analyze the data. Now, how to analyze data? In analyzing data, the researcher has to use statistical techniques. Now, there are two types of statistical techniques: descriptive statistical techniques and inferential statistical techniques. That means for description, for describing the situation, researcher can use descriptive statistics. For example, such as mean, standard deviation, then mode, or simple tabulation, or table, so can be used. These statistical tools or techniques can call as the descriptive statistics. Researcher also can use inferential statistics. That means that will help researcher to identify the relationship. For example, multiple regression or structural equation modeling. So these techniques can be used to identify the relationships between dependent and independent variables. So researcher will analyze collected data by using these statistical tools. Before analyzing, researcher will go for editing the data. If there is incomplete data or biased data, researcher has to eliminate those data from the data set, and then by using these statistical techniques, researcher will go for analyzing. After analyzing, researcher will come up with the result. So now it is the time to interpret or analyze the results. Now, this interpretation part can be written in a report form. So, in an idealistic research report, there are three parts: prefatory part, main body, and appended part. In prefatory part, researcher will include the preliminary aspects of the research, and in main body, researcher will answer the question of hypothesis, answer the question of objectives of his or her research, and in appended part, researcher will include the references or appendix or other less important documents that other readers might be interested to study. So, in a research process, there are 7 steps involved. It starts from defining the problem, then reviewing the literature, then developing hypothesis, then development of designing research, then collection of data, then analyzing data, and then interpretation and writing the reports. So, dear students, I hope that these discussions will help you to understand the business research process clearly. Thank you.